There is no federal solution. This gets solved at a state level. I'm looking at Governor Sununu on the board here.
Really? You decide this now that the federal government has no real role in or solution to this, but this is to be handled on the state level? Really? Really? Now you decide that the federal government should not be the ones trying to mandate this and or guide the courts, but that this should be handled on the state level? Really? You say that after putting out three potentially unconstitutional, unlawful, and definitely a violation of individual right and or bodily autonomy federal jab mandates that cost tens of thousands of people, if not upwards to hundreds of thousands of individuals, their jobs already in fear of this, and or force another great percentage of those who had no intentions of getting this until all of the dust had settled, the science and or long-term studies. When I say science, I mean long-term studies had been done on this, enough information had been known before in order to make an informed decision, were then forced into getting something against their will, out of fear of losing their job over a deadline that was ever looming. Many people who had breakdowns of anxiety. Now you decide the federal government has no role, no major role, but this should be left up to the states. So shout out to everyone. I want to encourage everyone to hold the line. Do not comply, because this is getting shot down in the courts one by one. We've already saw initially the OSHA mandate was struck down first back in early November across the country nationwide in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. We then saw the CMS mandate struck down in the latter part of November, followed quickly by the federal contractor mandate. Now it does look like the Circuit Court of Appeals did come and lift the stay on the OSHA mandate, but they made no ruling for or against the mandate. They just said, while this is being litigated, we're no longer blocking it from being implemented while this gets worked out in the legal indoor court system. But they said nothing to address the major legal and constitutional concerns that the unanimous opinion of the judges in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals raised, which, by the way, that as well as the national CMS mandate, which was lifted as well and only applied to those specific states that filed the motion in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals at the time, as well as other individual states, and then getting their own stay approved in the courts, i.e. my home state of Texas now. So as a result of the national stay being lifted on the CMS, and for those states that were therefore affected, lawsuits were then sent to the Supreme Court for both the CMS and the OSHA mandate. And those oral arguments are being held as we speak. And now Biden wants to say the federal government has no role, despite the fact that one of the major arguments that the states are having, in particular to the OSHA and their CMS and federal contractor mandate, is that only the states have the right to do something like this. That a lot of people were referring to a Supreme Court decision back in 1905. It was the state of, I believe, California versus an individual, and the Supreme Court ruled that the state, not the federal government, had the right to implement a vaccine mandate at the time, which otherwise resulted in a simple fine. He didn't have to comply. He just had to really pay the fine if he didn't wish to comply. But again, the argument was that the state, not the federal government. So with these Supreme Court rulings now looming, knowing that the final decision is about to be landed down and or brought down, now he makes the argument that this needs to be handled on the state level. I think that they smell blood in the water. Biden administration's waving the white flag and admitting defeat. And I believe it really was an overreach in an attempt to get individuals to comply out of fear that this really was a thing that was going to happen. And it worked to a great degree, but to those who held the line, stuck by their morals and their laurels, the fight's not over. It's long fight, but you got to continue to hold your ground. Shout out to the people living in Texas and Florida. Hold your ground, because you do have a lot of support in your respective states. Here in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott, back on October the 11th, I believe, signed Executive Order 40, therefore making it illegal on the state level for any entity in the state of Texas, private and or public sector, to force their customers and or employees to take the jab, and that an employee or customer had the right to refuse said jab on the basis of either religious, medical, and or moral consciousness. All right, and that's a lot of things that I believe a number of Texas or Texan employers on the private industry anyway are leaving out. They're trying to make you believe that you only have a religious and or medical exemption, when in reality they should, if they want to remain compliant with the laws in Texas, they have to also offer the moral exemption, i.e. and or a moral accommodation, i.e. you only have to have a moral, conscious, sincere belief that this goes against what you believe. It doesn't even have to be religious. And speaking of religious, let's not forget that according to the laws and the rules that they do have to abide by when it comes to religious mandate as well, it doesn't have to be any particular scripture against vaccine, against jab mandates. It doesn't have to be approved by the Pope, bishops, pastors, whatever. Religious accommodation is not just theistic, it is also ethical and or moral beliefs that one has, moral consciousness. So that also falls within that framework. You can go check it out. I'll leave a link in the description box below that you can refer to. So I know a lot of people in other states who are afraid, well, I don't have a religious argument. My pastor's not going against it. All these other Christians, all these other Muslims, Jews, Hindus, what have you, are all signing up, and or there's nothing in particular in my tenet. It doesn't have to just be theistic. It can just be moral and or ethical. So go ahead, look it up. I'll put the link in the description box below. For my people, though, particularly in Texas, don't be conned, don't be pressured. You do have your protections. You do not need to go down this path thinking you need to get a doctor to sign a medical exemption. You do not need to be able to research scripture and determine, like, where does this scripture say. You just need a moral belief and or say that and have a sincere belief that it goes against your conscience. Now, for my people in Florida, you have that extra protection because it goes much farther than just a executive order, which can be undone with the arrival of a new governor. So unlike here in Texas, because our state Senate dropped the ball in terms of passing any legislation, Floridians have that extra protection because the Florida State Senate and Florida House of Representatives passed a bill back in December. I believe it was House Bill 1, signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis, so that this is now official, so that if Ron DeSantis were to run for president in 2024 and win and gets replaced by a new governor, God forbid a Democratic governor by some miracle, it can't be undone. You know, it is law. And so unless if all of those senators and our House representative get totally replaced in the Florida Congress or Florida state legislature, and that legislature then passes a law, it's a done deal. And that's not likely to happen anytime soon. So you have added protection and a right to also potentially sue your employer that tries to convince you otherwise of medical discrimination. Definitely opens the work for medical discrimination lawsuits. Hold the line, y'all. Hold the line. The fight for freedom is never over, long-standing, but it's one worth having. You have to fight for the life you want, or fight for what you love, fight for the freedoms that you cherish, or you will mourn for what you've lost. This is Bruce the Boss. Please don't forget to like this video, comment on this video, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Your subscriptions go a long way with allowing me to produce more content. With that said, once again, happy holidays to everyone. Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah, happy Festivus, happy Kwanzaa, happy New Year. I don't care who gets offended. Peace, love, joy. I'm out. Peace.